Daniel just added you as a co-host. I think you should. There we go. Do
Hey
you want
there.
to just give your hey Daniel, lovely to have you on. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. How about you?
Long day, but getting there.
Fantastic. You know, we keep things super busy here. I know that's just the way crypto is.
That is it. 24/7, right?
Yeah, nonstop.
But it's great to have a project of your size on because a lot of the Cosmos projects that we have, in terms of I guess um, impact and market cap, etc. They're doing well, but they're ascertaining to get to the level and size of influence as Ascendex. So it's great to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and obviously, it's a pleasure to be that liquidity venue for Sifchain. So obviously, we have a long-standing relationship going back to that kind of initial listing, but would love to kind of continue the dialogue going here. Curious to hear updates from your end. I'm sure we have updates from our end as well. But yeah, just
That's it.
some background on myself, if that's
Yes, go for it. Please
easy.
tell us who are you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Daniel here. I operate on the Ascendex research and ventures team. So that involves doing a lot of different things, right? But frankly, there's the venture side of the business, which is actually investing in projects. But more to the main role here is supporting listings, doing due diligence on various projects, and all of the above, making sure that any kind of primary listing, secondary listing, initial exchange offering runs smoothly, and that we're supporting some very high quality projects for our retail user base.
And look, on that note, just to clarify for everybody, anything that you may hear is not financial advice, and you should do your own research. That's very important to clarify, right, Daniel?
Exactly. Obviously, that goes without saying, but yes, and there's no investment advice going on here.
That's it. That's it. It's just a casual chat. So look, Daniel, look, really impressive background. Have you just only ever worked in crypto, or what was your background before that?
Yeah, so before actually being in crypto, I was in traditional venture, mostly doing emerging markets venture capital, so investing in tech companies in places like Latin America, Southeast Asia, Middle East, stuff like that. But have always had the crypto bug. Was a Bitcoiner from a long time ago, and basically made the jump full time here. But have been paying very close attention to the market dynamics for a long time now. So happy to be playing that both investment and research role here at Ascendex, which is a centralized exchange. We were founded in 2018, started out of Singapore, and have expanded more globally since then.
Fantastic. And in terms of in terms of Ascendex, do you want to run through any kind of new products or features that you guys have up and coming?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the more exciting news recently was kind of a UI revamp. So if you go to Ascendex, you can see that we have an updated UI. We're kind of running through the whole website there. That's a very exciting development here as we scale the business, professionalize, segment different business lines. It's something that's very exciting. Hopefully we can get some feedback there. We can continue to iterate. Always kind of focus on that product side. Another kind of recent product development is a new product, what we're calling Launch Pool, which is very exciting for our user base. Essentially, what it is single side staking in, let's just call it USDT, for example, to get the kind of retail community is extremely engaged for a new project. So for a new primary listing, we may run a Launch Pool campaign where various users can stake their USDT, and in return, they actually earn those assets, and then can get excited about a new primary listing. So that's another product we listed recently. But in general, here at Ascendex, we've been scaling quite rapidly over the past, let's just call it 6 months since we closed our Series B. So things are exciting here.
Excellent stuff. And look, I don't care what anyone says about centralized exchanges. They are essential to the ecosystem, and everyone has a choice in where they use them, whether they use them, whether they don't use them. It's a choice. And just to let you know, I bought my first Rowan via Ascendex.
Fantastic.
And a couple of other tokens also, but the first Rowan that I did get was on Ascendex, and just to clarify, Ascendex is official listing. Look, I don't know if you saw this or not, but very, very strangely and kind of out of nowhere, we were listed on Hotbit today.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
it was news to everybody at Sifcore, and had absolutely um, no interaction from us, shall we say. So it was a bit of a strange one, but I just want to clarify, Ascendex is our official listing partner. So look, we've had we're coming up to the end of March, basically at the end of March, and it's been a really strange start to the year from a crypto perspective. What do you feel like have been some of the maybe lesser known influences on crypto pricing? Obviously, you've got the tragic events that are happening in Eastern Europe. You've got that kind of knock on of the oil, etc. We've had hyperinflation basically hitting anything. But are there any aspects you feel like we're underappreciating that are having an impact on crypto pricing?
Yeah, sure. Happy to answer that and go into detail there. I just want to step back and address one of the things you said earlier, which is fundamentally, right, being a centralized exchange, where we are and where we sit in the ecosystem. The way we think about it is that we are completely ecosystem agnostic. We want to help support as many different ecosystems realize their full potential, and that involves supporting the Cosmos ecosystem, Ethereum, Solana, all of the above. And as a centralized player, right, we're sometimes seen as the quote unquote bad guy here, but again, we're trying to facilitate that ability for people who may not be DeFi crypto native to actually convert into those users, and being that bridge between CeFi and DeFi. So I think we're pretty excited to be playing that role there. In terms of market dynamics, right? Obviously, the market has been rallying over the past kind of, let's just call it, a couple of days. And there has been a confluence of a lot of negative events, such as like the Ukraine, Russia freezing of central bank reserves. There's kind of uncertainty around the kind of monetary dynamics, which is at a very high level, a macro dynamic. But in the micro caps, there are some real strong fundamentals, right? Obviously, we're seeing, let's just say, for example, the Stargate and Layer Zero. There's a lot of excitement around that. Some really exciting infrastructure projects being built. From a macro perspective, let's call it the majors here, the BTC, the ETH. A really interesting development here, I think, is with Terra creating that demand for Bitcoin to kind of back Luna and UST. So I think that's been an exciting catalyst that has sprung forth some interesting price action. And I think BTC has been leading kind of from a majors perspective, and the alts seem to be rotating now. So I think that's pretty keeping a close eye on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I mean, look, the amount that was mentioned, $10 billion of Bitcoin. A lot of people have cited that as having a direct impact on the Bitcoin price. But I mean, let's be brutally honest here. If they purchased that quantity of Bitcoin sensibly, that would vanish into the daily trading volume of Bitcoin, right? It's not really necessarily going to have an effect, but maybe the announcement itself would probably have the bigger effect, I would say. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say it's less about the actual quantity of Bitcoin that they're saying, and more of the idea that they are trying to go about backing a stable coin with BTC, right? And that is kind of taking on this narrative of, let's just call it the collateral pure monetary asset that Bitcoin is, and that narrative there. So again, yeah, I would agree with you, right? Like the market could handle that kind of buying demand, but I think it's more about how it's getting integrated into the Terra ecosystem, which is extremely exciting.
Definitely, and obviously Terra being a massive, technically Cosmos project, right?
Exactly.
I mean, they there, a lot of people that are entering cryptocurrency, I would say now, don't even necessarily appreciate that Terra is a Cosmos zone, right? It's
Exactly.
just an extremely large one.
And frankly, a lot of them are, I would say, unfamiliar with the architecture and the trade-offs between different networks, right? So obviously, every chain on Cosmos, just like Sifchain, is a unique L1, right? So and has their own kind of integration requirements, et cetera. But I think we're seeing a lot of exciting developments in the Cosmos space in particular. We're excited to be looking to support a CW20 standard at some point in the near future. Obviously, that would be a specification for fungible tokens using Cosmosm.
That's it.
So yeah, I mean,
We're big fans. We're big fans of Cosmosm. So it's definitely. I mean, there's pardon me. There's some points right now around the IBC transferability of CW20s.
Yeah.
But I think that's getting ironed out in the next, well, with a time frame of in 3 months' time. But we are massive fans of that also at Sifchain.
Yeah, no, agreed. We're keeping a close eye there, and there are a number of different kind of architectures that different projects are coming to market with. Obviously, there's been a lot of excitement around AVAX recently with the AVAX Summit. You could say that there is a similar architecture with something what today we call subnets, which would be basically unique L1s that are somewhat similar to the AVAX main chain, but they don't necessarily directly share in the security. But there's a similar approach there. Obviously, everyone's familiar with Polkadot and others here, so very very much keeping a close eye there.
I love it. I mean, look, because it's the whole point of Cosmos, right? And this sometimes gets completely overlooked with maybe the hype of airdrops and the rest of it. The reason that we picked Cosmos to build on was because it was designed purely for interoperability. That was literally the whole point of it. So, I was at the Avalanche conference and they're talking interoperability as the main talking point. So it's that element is definitely being a key subject, or I see it as being a key subject for 2022.
Yeah, and I would agree with you there, right? That is a very hot narrative, and it will continue to be so as long as we have these secluded ecosystems that are not natively and easily interoperable, right? Even things like EVM, different virtual machines, right? Like all these things are kind of fragmenting the market, even let's just call it L2s or L1s. So obviously, interoperability is a core focus of a lot of builders in the space. That narrative is going to be extremely strong, I think, over the coming years.
And okay, so then this is an interesting one. So staking. So obviously Ascendex has got some fantastic APRs across lots and lots of tokens. How valuable do you feel that the staking opportunities are in respect to the intrinsic value of a token itself? Because and what I really mean is, a token can be building something and trying to achieve some specific goal, but at the same time, look, it's cryptocurrency 24/7, and if there aren't necessarily that many staking options for that token, it does lose a lot of momentum and a lot of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so I think what you're getting at here is that like the fundamentals of a project are not always necessarily go one in one with the token economics and the staking, right? Obviously, there's a lot of overlap there in that a attractive, let's just call it staking opportunities can attract liquidity, and liquidity begets liquidity, making it easier for buyers and sellers to meet in a marketplace, right? So those dynamics exist and will continue to persist, I think. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of opportunities for staking, right? There's even from a stables perspective, you could see 5, 10, 20% APR staking, and those are very attractive, frankly, right? So yeah, I think getting to your point there, they don't necessarily go hand in hand, but often there is an overlap if they can have a mutually beneficial effect.
And with stable coins, how do you pick or select which stable coin you have a preference for? Because you've got Tether, you've got UST, you've got USDC, you've got a ton of stable coins that are representing the same underlying asset, which is obviously the dollar. What kind of metrics do you use to decide between them?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a great question, right? At a high level, we keep track of all the developments and growth in networks, right? So obviously, UST has been growing quite dramatically, even when you compare it to, let's just say, DAI over the kind of the recent months. So we take into account all those trends. USDC again has been expanding a lot, expanding to multiple chains, and being supported natively across a lot of ecosystems. Those are all exciting developments. I personally tend to separate them in my mind between the fully backed, let's just call it non-algorithmic stables, and the algorithmic stables as kind of a clear defined difference. And often that comes with centralization versus decentralization, censorship resistant versus non-censorship resistance. But that's typically the way I would think about it, and various risks associated with each in various directions.
Great answer. Absolutely great answer. Spot on. And we like in the previous session of this, we had another Cosmos native stablecoin, which was e-money, and
Yeah,
their focus is really on non-US stable coins, which is a definitely underserved marketplace, I would say.
yeah, I would agree with you there. Obviously, we're supporters of e-money, so it's good to hear you guys are kind of doing some mutual collaboration there. But the thing that is interesting about, let's just say, the stablecoin market is that it is highly dominated by US dollar stablecoins, right? Even more so than I would say than traditional markets. The US dollar is the quote unquote reserve currency in the world, and it's used for many international transactions, even with jurisdictions that are not actually using US dollars locally. However, in DeFi, it's even more dominant. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it is a very interesting dynamic. And I think there is a lot of room for other stable coins to kind of increase their market share that are non-US dollar stable coins. But what we've seen is that there is this outsized demand for stable coins and US dollar assets that have been unfulfilled to date. And with the rise of cryptocurrency, stable coins, people all over the world are enabled to get exposure to US dollar pegged assets.
And how do you see government-backed stable coins at some point in the future entering the market? What do you see as the overall, I guess, crypto macro effect on that?
Yeah, so central bank digital currencies, let's call them, it really depends on how they're implemented, right? Obviously, there's a discussion here in the US around, will there be central bank digital currencies? How will they implement it? Will there be privacy factors directly built in? How will that work? Still a lot of remaining questions. And I would say the direct kind of ways in which these things are built are extremely important as to what their effects will be, right? You can go more towards, let's just call it the authoritarian approach with more kind of direct insight into user behavior, and the more privacy oriented approach with less of that. I do think, however, a lot of the regulated stable coins that are fully backed, like something like USDC, the government getting in and the Fed getting in and kind of releasing potentially central bank digital currencies, it'll be interesting to see how those dynamics play out. But I think there's still a lot to be determined there.
And from Ascendex's point of view, I mean, I'm guessing it may be early, but if you've got any insight on this, I would absolutely love to know it. I mean, would it a government-backed stablecoin be listed on Ascendex as a pairing? Is there anything around that you can add some information on?
Yeah, so no particulars here, but in general, our pairs are denominated in USDT as of right now. And there are, let's just say, multiple stablecoin pairs with that USDT that can be swapped back and forth, something like USDC, a one-to-one pair, essentially. So we're open to listing multiple types of stable coins from our exchange, but users can exchange those one-to-one here, or they can be using them in DeFi where they would swap USDC for USDT, for DAI, UST, all of the above. So we're happy to support various stable coins in those respects, but from a pair perspective, we tend to keep it as USDT.
Okay, interesting. And just look, as always, if there's any questions that pop up, please feel free just to put that request in and jump right in. Otherwise, it just becomes me getting as much information out of our guest as possible. So look, we're looking at a nice little uptick. Like you said, the last few days. Um, you know, it kind of feels like you then suddenly have this YouTube explosion of Bitcoin to $10 million, and Ethereum is going to flip Bitcoin again on from every influencer on Instagram. What do you think are realistic expectations for end of the year prices for? And I'm only going to pick three, and I don't want to put you under the spot. I won't quote you on it, but Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Atom. How do you see that? I mean, if you're in conducting your research, do you have price predictions that you're happy to go with?
Yeah, so a year out is a long way here, especially in crypto, as we all know. I've approached these kind of price predictions on the long term from less of a kind of specific price prediction standpoint, but more on a fundamental basis. Are the network effects of all these ecosystems growing? Are they attracting more users? Is the value actually locked in these ecosystems increasing? And if that is the case, I am generally bullish on those ecosystems. So, am I cautiously optimistic right now? Yes. Am I very much aware of the kind of macro conditions that are occurring right now? Yes, as well, right? And those have a direct effect on risk assets. So obviously, crypto is out there on the risk curve. Anything from the Federal Reserve increasing rates to more, let's just call it chaos on the kind of current monetary order as things are shifting there with the war, et cetera. There are a lot of variables here. But all in all, I am very much bullish on the fundamentals and the growth of these ecosystems.
Okay, excellent. And I like it. You definitely avoided giving a specific price prediction. I don't
That's
blame
my
you, buddy.
job.
I don't blame you. It's impossible. I mean, would you say from your own, like, maybe even personal portfolio, do you ever ignore technical analysis, or are you very strict and consistent with the results of your technical analysis? People that know me personally, I always tell them I don't do anything. I don't believe any of the technical analysis, because one tweet can change your price in about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I would say here. I would say that I use technical parameters, indicators, analysis to augment and support any fundamental thesis I have. And I think that is a very, very positive way to look at it. Obviously, there are some truths to technical analysis, but in its own, in a silo, sometimes you can miss out on kind of the true fundamental trends that are ongoing. So I tend to use it as a support and not as a primary, let's just call it, point of information. But it is very much a determination and an input into any calculus I'm making, in particular when it comes to entering and exiting.
Which ones would you say are the most influential indicators that you look at?
Yeah. So obviously it depends on the trade, but often liquidity is very important, right? Here at Ascendex, we are very, very focused on liquidity. We understand that liquidity begets liquidity, so that when a market participant enters into a trade, if there is a lot of slippage on that trade or they move the market substantially, that is an unattractive user experience. And frankly, it hurts with execution. and any potential ROI in any trades they're making. So whenever I'm entering a market, I like to see, how liquid is the market? What are the conditions with that respect? What kind of venues are the assets listed on? Things of that sort.
Okay. Okay, good stuff. I thought you were just going to take the easy route and say 3 month moving average.
Obviously, those
Uh,
are very so. The moving averages obviously are important, but those are just trend lines, and you can see people draw lines on a lot of charts that look really good, and then you look back on those charts, and more than half the time, those things are incorrect, right? So you have to take those with a grain of salt, unless you're really a pro in the space.
that's it. Everyone's hindsight portfolio is worth billions, right?
Exactly. We've all been there.
I do know one guy, and he just waits for a token to tank, and then he draws a line, and then puts a little green arrow at the end pointing upwards. And I feel like it's more like hopium than necessarily technical analysis. Are there any ecosystems that you feel like are up and comers? Some obviously look, Avalanche is massive already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously Cosmos again is breaking into that top 20. Are there any ecosystems that you feel like you've seen more action in recently that people may not be aware of?
Yeah, I would say other than those kind of core ecosystems we've referred to, and obviously Cosmos is a very exciting one that we're paying close attention to all the time. But putting those aside, I think a few that I've been paying close attention to include Near ecosystem, Arweave, and a couple of others. They are still pretty early in terms of actual projects being built, that kind of core infrastructure, still waiting to see what kind of interesting, innovative projects are being built. Um, from a near perspective, obviously they take a sharding approach with regards to scaling, which has its pros and its cons. However, there is a strong Rust-based developer community that is emerging there. Electric Capital released a really good report at the end of 2021 detailing all the various developer communities and their growth. And Near was one of those with a pretty high growth rate. So you always like to follow the developers is one way to think about it. And from an Arweave perspective, I think what they're doing with permanent storage, and basically accessibility is really important from an ideological perspective. And I think a lot of projects are starting to build there. They're more infrastructure oriented, and I would say less exciting from a retail perspective. But there is certainly a lot of innovation happening.
I'm loving it, buddy, because you're naming stuff that I've had in my portfolio for a while. So that's fantastic. I mean, Near Protocol, you've got Aurora, which I believe is their EVM, and
Exactly.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but one of the big feature releases Sifchain's got coming up is Omni EVM, and
Very cool.
the near and it's bridging, etc. But permissionless, trustless, etc. But it's Near Protocol is definitely very very high at the top of the list, and Aurora is obviously their kind of focus point. Okay, excellent. And the other one you mentioned, it's
Are we?
it's gone. Yeah, Arweave as well. Very interesting project, and one that I probably would prefer to have a few more bags of than I actually do.
And frankly, we've been paying really, really close attention to the L2 developments. Things like optimistic rollups, are a lot of projects building on top of them now, like Optimism, Arbitrum. But the ZK rollup landscape is pretty exciting. We as a team have been paying close attention to Starkware, Starknet. Projects are very much early in that space, but there are unique advantages to building on those layer two scaling solutions. And they have a unique language, let's say, called Cairo, which is a little bit more difficult. So those network effects don't persist as much in something like a Rust-based virtual machine. But there is still very much a lot of very cool innovation happening there. And that is clearly the one of the main approaches to scaling on Ethereum. So that will be an ongoing development that we will continue to trace very closely.
Definitely. One thing that you mentioned that was interesting, to follow the developers, and Rust is definitely, you mentioned it as well. It's definitely one of the most in demand developer skills out there. As far as I know, and look, I'm not a developer, it has a relatively longer term learning process than I would say Solidity and other languages. Do you have, a lot of projects are building on Rust right now. How do you take into account, I guess, the economics of labor into your approach? Because as I understand it, and look, I was at Avalanche last week. I'm also a big Polkadot fan. Rust is getting chewed up, and we might be hitting a point whereby there's not enough Rust developers to go round. So how do you see that impacting maybe ecosystems or even any specific projects?
Yeah, I think those are some very good points there, and I can kind of go across that point by point. I think in general, there was a structural shortage of developers in the crypto space, and that has to do with competition with Web2, supply side, labor dynamics, all of that. Putting that all aside, I think those languages that already have their let's call it their big audiences that use them, their network effects in of themselves. Rust is an example of that is used outside of crypto, frankly, a lot. And while maybe there's a shortage of crypto developers in the near term, there is very much an incentive and for users to learn that, as well as those who already know it to come into the space. Something like Solidity, where there is a huge network effect in crypto, has those kind of, let's call it, initial advantages in the crypto space, but it's not used outside of crypto and EVM, right? So those are kind of the trade-offs you think about. But in a nascent ecosystem like Starknet, where they're using a unique programming language like Cairo, that can have some effects that are bottlenecks in terms of ecosystem growth. So yes, those are all important considerations.
That's it. We've got someone who wants to ask a question. Aslam Limondo 3. So just going to invite you up here right now. And oh wait, maybe okay. He's disconnected. I promise you, he did request to speak, Daniel. I'm not just winding you up.
I saw it as well.
Hopefully he'll be back. All right. So then, because look, I appreciate don't necessarily have that much time left. What's your forecast for the next 2 to 4 weeks? How are you? Like, are we getting pulled into a bull trap? Are you seeing this as a genuine start to maybe 2022 getting going? Is there anything people should be cautious about and watch out for?
Yeah, I would say, as always, if you're a bull, be cautiously optimistic, and the same on the other side of that, right? There are some interesting short-term developments that are happening that I think are exciting. I'm optimistic about, but that's very much tempered optimism. There are a lot of things happening from a macro perspective that can, frankly, things can adjust very quickly and correct, right? We know there's volatility to the up and to the downside in crypto. This is very much known by everyone here, I assume. I'm remaining cautiously optimistic around majors, and I think around alts as well. But yeah, and obviously on particular projects that I have fundamental kind of theses on, I am remaining long those.
So you're a bit of a hodler.
Yeah, you could call me a hodler.
As long as you've got them staked somewhere decent, keep on holding. Look, maybe, and if anyone has a question, please feel free to stick your hand up. and requests. So, look, one thing that for me, especially, look, short term, mid term, long term, we've reached a point in time whereby we have had massive amounts of dollars printed. Um, the Bitcoin is a hedge to inflation argument. I don't think we've been in a better place than right now to really see that impact. So, why do you feel Bitcoin hasn't maybe done better? I know it's up 30% in the last maybe 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
but don't you feel that it's still lagging what it should be given the actual macro specifics we've got right now?
Yeah, it's very much an interesting question as to, okay, why isn't Bitcoin doing better? This is the perfect environment for it in theory. The monetary order is kind of changing. There's inflation that's persistent around the world. Bitcoin is supposed to be the censorship resistant hedge. Maybe it's playing out well, but not in the most kind of optimistic case. And we still have to remember that the asset class is still early and young, right? Bitcoin is let's just call it $1 trillion asset, compared to things like gold, which are more on the realm of 10 to 12 trillion. Bitcoin is still in the process of monetizing. So while it is that quote unquote, or what people would like to call hard money, it also is a risk asset and is very much correlated with the stock market nowadays, especially in kind of certain periods of times in times of volatility. So when equities go risk on or risk off, that flows into crypto similarly. So I do think that a lot of this has to do with still, right, we're early, the nascent state of the ecosystem and all of those kind of correlated dynamics.
Definitely. Chris, you wanted to ask a question. Please feel free, go for it.
Well, I was going to just make more of a comment on that point around adoption, really. By the way, hi Daniel and hi Nick, doing a great job here. Hi everybody.
Hey Chris.
You're not supposed to give my name out, but yeah, just pretend no one heard that. But yeah, go for it.
Sorry, Sif. I dox myself, so geez, what can I say? I just tend to seem to think that people don't look at the adoption or the price of Bitcoin over the right sort of time horizons, right? Like when we're thinking about innovation, genuine innovation takes years, if not decades. And where we are really is just in a blip, in a moment in time. I had this conversation with colleagues today, which were like, you really think the price of X is going to go another 10x from here? It's like, well, as Daniel was just saying, with the sort of market cap of gold, 12 trillion. I mean, that's with an asset class that's been around for a long time, but ultimately doesn't have the same features as Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in terms of its portability and just being able to get it across, take it wherever you go. So in the years to come, I don't see why we couldn't easily eclipse these sorts of market caps for gold or precious metals, right? And at that point, we probably are looking at another 5 or 10 years. So it depends on how long you're thinking about being in this for. If you're in it for short-term gains, then you can be disappointed with the price on any given day. But if you're in it for the long term, then just ride and die, right?
That's a great point. That's a great point in terms of time frames and judging on time frames. And Daniel, just to let you know, when Chris says he was talking to his colleagues, he works at IOHK.
Fantastic.
Or Cardano. So they were probably all slapping themselves in the back around Cardano absolutely killing it the last week or two, which I'm very happy to see.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, everybody's made us feel, well, the market's made the price feel quite paltry for the last few months, right? But again, it just depends over what time horizon.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with you with that respect. If you look at adoption of, let's just call Bitcoin compared to the internet, it is happening at a much more rapid pace. And obviously, it is standing on the shoulders of giants of all the other technical infrastructure that has been built beforehand so that that adoption can happen at that pace. But agreed, sometimes you have to take a step back and realize where you are within that context. Cardano as well is very much an ecosystem that we're excited about supporting, and we are definitely talking to some projects in that ecosystem. So we are excited to support that retail community here at Ascendex.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks for that point, Chris. Much appreciated. Owen, do you have a question or comment?
Are we talking about Bitcoin?
we are talking about Bitcoin, Owen. We are.
So why did at the end of the year, why did people say it was going to rise up to 100,000 when it didn't?
I love hearing from early adopters. So look, it's a great question. Why did a lot of people say that? I don't genuinely know where the data that a lot of people went from, but at the same time, we also had it that inflation, I would say, is the biggest argument for why a lot of people said it was going to hit that level. So I don't know how much you know about inflation, but I'd definitely go and check on that one.
Okay. How, like NFTs as well, what are they like at the moment? How much pricey do they go for?
It all depends on the collection, the artist, the network that it's on. So, look, you got to do your own research. But Owen, if you want a piece of advice from me, start at OpenSea. All right.
Mhm.
Thanks for coming on.
All right.
Well, it was it's been fantastic chatting here. Sifchain, I'm really happy to have chatted with you here. I do have to jump in just a minute. So, I just want to thank you for having me on.
No problem, Daniel. And hopefully, even, from that last questions that we had, it shows that Ascendex is a great place to start if you're getting into crypto.
Exactly. Couldn't agree with you more.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Unless there's any other questions, gonna have to jump. So thank you for everybody popping along, and the comments and questions and feedback, always welcome.